Oh, I gotta say, you got it.
Live from the Plutopia News Network, this is the Plutopia Happy Hour. Our guest tonight is David Damaris. I'm Scoop Sweeney, and my artificially intelligent co-host is John Lebkowski.
Wait a minute.
Say what?
Artificially intelligent?
Hey,
I'm not intelligent at all.
Oh, there you go.
Oh my gosh. And our guest tonight is David Damaris. Dave is an engineer, a computer neuroscientist, an artist, a musician. Wow, he does everything. He's even written an opera, and he knows a lot about AI. And that's what we're talking about tonight is AI, aka artificial intelligence. David, welcome.
Thanks, John. Good to be back. It seems like maybe wasn't that long ago that we were talking about artificial intelligence here, but
you're the only person I can think of that I was talking to about artificial intelligence in the 1990s. So I think you may have been ahead of the curve there. I think that's what we were talking about. Or maybe we were just talking about intelligence in general.
Yeah, I was certainly into it back in those days, and I guess I was enamored of all of the strange little corners that are kind of still around that were, slightly oppositional, maybe starting in the 80s, like these ideas of embodied cognition as something that you had to care about. And, well, it's kind of a bad word now, but was there any sort of relationship between chaos theory and the brain and intelligence and all these kinds of things? So that's just to give you an idea of where I started out with all of this stuff. But I do try to kind of keep up with what's going on and the things that we're blessed to have surrounding us today in terms of.
Well, I have my question. The question that emerged most readily for me when I was thinking about doing this show was kind of what is intelligence? And, do we really know that much about intelligence? Do we really have that much intelligence?
Well, it's a good question, and it does come up in these contexts of like are the things that we have now, and even if this week Chat GPT suddenly has the ability to look at images as it's having a conversation with you and give you advice about how to fix your barbecue grill. Apparently, that's one of the examples. So still is the question of, is it intelligence? And I just was, reviewing some of the critics of the advances in the last couple of years, and are they really getting closer or not? And there are people that are starting to make some claims about more general analysis and the kind of things that people do, like there was a kind of test. There's always been a kind of fascination with tests for artificial intelligence, like the Turing test was the thing that we heard about for a while. And, when chatbots were very basic, but they were around and they were just kind of parlor tricks, really. You could still fool some of the people some of the time. And we thought about that being the Turing test. And some people have continued to try to think about what would be good tests or benchmarks for knowing whether we're getting closer to human-like intelligence. So there's something called like the abstract reasoning corpus, and I have a paper sitting around on my browser tab that I have not read yet, where some people said, yeah, we're actually able to get it to do pretty well on this kind of abstract reasoning tests. And we think because of that we'll be able to also translate that into very general capabilities in robotics. But in general, I think the biggest fall down with the kind of language model transformer based AI, which is more or less what people care about in the last year or two,
Yeah.
is that it is still not very clear that they understand and can, if they seem to understand one thing, could they transfer that understanding to something new that they have not really been exposed to in training in the way that people seem to be able to do. There are also issues about common sense, like should a self-driving car stop for a tumbleweed?
The knee-jerk reaction lately has been AI is going to kill us. It's going to take our jobs. It's going to take our copyrights. And that just seems to be the current buzzword. But lately, the thing that scares me is the capital funds, the venture capitalists are saying AI is going to be bigger than the internet and bigger than mobile. It's like, okay. Does that sound realistic?
I'll be worried when I see an AI working construction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although,
And that's another thing where, if you've seen any of the like DARPA robotic challenges and the fails with those robots trying to do like open a door or something, I would say that until quite recently that sort of side of things has looked pretty grim. I think I saw something in the last week or so, and I'm trying to sort of delve into it a little bit more, where Toyota Research and some AI lab at Columbia have taken this idea of they call these diffusion models, which are the things that allow us to generate images for the most part. They started working with that concept and in robotics, and are trying to do things where within a framework of like teaching, say like a two-handed manipulator robot. So they're basically teaching it to do certain kinds of tasks, putting it in this kind of a model, and then saying, okay, now we're going to try to get you we're going to give you a new object to manipulate. And it sounds like they're getting pretty good results doing this. And as far as I know, this is pretty early work in terms of doing that kind of, grasping robotics work using these kind of generative AI models. So I'm just going to be paying attention to what's going on in that space, really, to see whether there's suddenly a big ramp up in terms of how industrial robots or humanoid kind of robots would be able to do more things, more range of tasks, and generalize from a small number of examples. And if y'all didn't know, I mean, this has been a kind of a subfield within robotics for a while, where it's kind of like learn by example, where you're teaching it, and so maybe you have yourself, you wear a kind of exoskeleton, and that kind of captures what you're doing with your hands and arms, and you do a task, and the robot training system is kind of watching this, I guess, and trying to do better rather than just trying to do it itself with some kind of pure learning system.
So it's trying to learn how to replicate the motions?
Yeah, at least it gets a start on it by having access to your data. And I mean, it's pretty clear that humans and animals learn a lot by watching others do it. And it seems like a big stretch that we're going to have that kind of watching. I think we don't really understand how that kind of abstraction of I watch you do something and then I can do it with my body. Because that kind of gets into another area that I might say something about that I watched recently. But Yeah, I mean, I think that once we get a certain amount of experience with our bodies, right, and we're able to sort of predict what's going to happen, if I think about if I put my left hand in front of my face and make an L, I can just kind of see what that's going to look like. And if I did it and I didn't see it, it would be disturbing, right? But I do see it, and so I'm sort of fully trained up on how my hands work and how they interact with my sensory system. So that's something that, like, but to watch somebody else make that L shape, I mean, I think humans can do this all the time, or I can listen to somebody else play a jazz, the beginning of a jazz solo, and I can say, oh, well, I'm going to answer what you did. I mean, people are fooling around with that stuff a little bit in AI generative models, but it all sort of falls into that category of autocomplete. Whereas I think what's going on when humans are interacting is a lot of, I know how my body works and I see you do something, so I'm going to somehow I can translate what you're doing into what I need to do, and it probably in a very different way than it works now. These
feels like it must be. I was just say, I feel like it feels like it must be fairly complex what's going on internally. I mean, in us, not thinking about robots, but robots. If you have robots where your intention is to replicate what we do, there's a degree of complexity there that we would really have to analyze. I mean, to what extent do we really even get the complexity of something as simple as like a hand emotion or something like that? There must be a lot going on there, but it's all very trained and coordinated, and it's happening something's happening really fast. I can think in my mind, I want to reach for something, and I reach for it just like that. I don't know how that gets replicated, and I'm not even sure why it gets replicated. I mean, I don't really understand the need for a humanoid robot, a robot that looks and behaves like a human. I was watching Ahsoka, one of the Star Wars shows today, and there were humanoid robots on there, that C-3PO et al. And let's see, I can't remember the name of the other one. There's a kind of lead robot in that particular show. But I was noticing that this robot emulates subtle like motions and tics and so forth that a human would have. Mm-hmm. And I don't understand why you would need to build a robot to do that. The robot needs to be able to communicate with you, maybe. And there's some tasks the robot needs to be able to do, but you don't have to build in a completely intricate replication of the human set of muscle motions in order to do that.
I think that's true, but I think that I did work for a little while on humanoid robotics, and one of the things
you built Philip Dick.
Yeah, one of the things that I worked on was the idea. I mean, it was within the general idea of a chatbot, but if you want to think about the whole organism, not just speech coming over a telephone line or something, we do a lot that you might think of as coordination in a dialogue. So, like, how do you know when I'm done talking and it's your turn to talk? Well, I'm
bad about not knowing that.
I mean, people,
as I just demonstrated,
maybe we lose it a little bit,
we all have that problem
like this, but in one-on-one interactions, one of the ways that it happens is that when you're done talking and you're ready for the other person to talk, so you're going to you're going to end your turn in a dialogue. It's not universal that every time you'll do that you'll blink, but more than half the time. So, like, let's say something like 70% of the time you'll blink when you're done talking and it's the other person's talk. So that was something that, just kind of doing some research, I was able to say, well, I think we can make the robot do that, and it'll just make a conversation feel more natural, like you're talking to a human, not to a bunch of wires and chips. And
well, the robots that are supposed to be
Go ahead.
The robots that are supposed to be driving these driverless taxis, they're not having a real good year so far. My friends in San Francisco are just have hilarious stories of you know herds of them gathering in one street and just blocking off the entire neighborhood, and no one can get the people that are at master control to untangle the web that they've created. And I hear that that's even happening in Austin on occasion of wayward driverless cars going and doing strange things. Is that something that can be fixed, or are they just trying to come up with something that's not really going to be that great?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I personally, they're around the neighborhood where I live quite regularly, and I saw one not long ago make a right turn, and basically the pedestrian light was on, and somebody was trying to cross, and they just turned and completely cut the guy off, and he he made a gesture of his frustration at the driverless car, So I felt a little bad for him. I said, like, I saw you, I feel you.
Yeah, the real problem seems to be, and even with like Tesla and there's so-called hands-free driving sensors, can't determine what a emergency vehicle is, if it's something to drive into or to avoid. And they've had some really nasty accidents, and that's the thing that concerns me.
It's
Like,
funny
before you
about
say
how,
that it's driverless, you better be perfect.
yeah, it's funny how fast that has come up, and we're basically kind of unwilling participants in this experiment. Uh, and we don't get paid. We're just taking some sort of risk that somebody decided was acceptable. And yeah, I mean, well, the history of AI is really not good on. Historically, things always sort of fumble down with what's called the edge case. It's like if you try to design without learning from millions of examples, you certainly never think of everything, and something comes up that you haven't dealt with. And the hope is that with really a lot of examples and sharing data between, so like you get all the experience of one car, but you pull it with all the other cars, that it is better. But humans can't really handle all the edge cases. I will tell you that I still driving a Vespa. Still lucky to be driving a Vespa, and today I'm going to Deep Eddy, and somebody suddenly is coming out of like a turnaround lane that is intended for people in the one way going the direction I'm going to, kind of do a U-turn and get back on the street in the other direction. But I'm in the middle of the lane. Somebody starts to come out of that turnaround lane going the wrong way on the street that I'm on. And I'm like, well, hopefully they just stop and this is all okay. But if they don't stop, the car kind of behind me and to my left is going to have to make some evasive action, or they're going to have to make an evasive action. And I, as a little guy in a scooter, I'm a little bit nervous about this, So now I'm trying to imagine what a self-driving car would do in this situation, right? Because what is their expectation, or what kind of move are they going to make when somebody suddenly appears going the wrong way down the street? I mean, that may just be I would imagine that is something that the developers make sure that that's in the training data. They probably have some rogue drivers that just get out there and harass these things, so that I would like to think so, right?
Yeah. After 60
I think the greatest
driving,
danger.
I want this job.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. I was just saying, after 60 some odd years of driving, I developed some skills that I think might be hard for automation to pick up on. The things like looking in the face of that person that's at the four-way stop and wondering, if I pull out like I'm legally, supposed to do, Are they going to blindside me and run into the side of me? And you can see their face going, nah, I'm going to let them go. I don't think the automation is going to pick up on cues.
Yeah, that is actually kind of a complicated problem, and I don't know how they handle it and how well they have. I haven't seen too many egregious fails in the ones around my neighborhood, and I have been at intersections where it's me and four of those cars at the intersection and no other live drivers, and they've seemed to do okay. But when it comes to a situation where like I'm at a four-way stop and I know the right of way rules, but I don't know if the other person knows the rules. I don't know how big of a hurry they're in. Sometimes people just do bad things. And you do try to make eye contact, and you could say, like, well, even though the rule is this, I'm going to tell you to keep going for whatever reason. So there's that kind of nonverbal negotiation for the most part. Hopefully it's friendly most of the time. And you don't get those with those cars. And if a person tells them to do something with a gesture, like, I don't know, can they read that? I don't think so. I doubt that that's very high on the list of anything they're working on, but I don't know that specifically. It's
one thing I used to do that was apparently not the right thing to do is when the light would change, I would just immediately go. And I was like that for years. And I think I was in a driver's ed class one time where a woman was teaching it, and she said, well, you should never do that. You should always wait, because how do you know that a person coming from the other direction is going to stop? And of course, there's some sense to that. I mean, even though the light is supposed to be like laying down the law, people will sometimes just ignore it and go breezing through that intersection. And I started being a little more cautious about it, but I'm thinking, are they going to program an AI car to understand that you don't just immediately take off when the light changes, or are they just going to,
That's a good question.
Those are subtleties, There's a lot of subtleties in driving.
And it would be easier to do it if it was all self-driving cars that followed the rules, but that isn't what we have.
One subtlety that I've developed is I check out the bumper stickers on the vehicles around me, especially on the freeway. If I see a bunch of "Don't tread on me" and "Trump train" stickers, I'll back off and I'll let them continue on down the road.
But yeah, count me also in the I don't go right out, or especially if I'm approaching the intersection and it turns green, so I'm not even there yet. I wasn't stopped, and a lot of people their tendency would be to keep going through, and I especially after some recent experiences that I had.
And that's defensive driving, right? That's the kind of stuff you're supposed to do.
It slows everybody down, but I see enough light runners in town here to I'm willing to give it that extra, take a breath. And,
there was an item.
Well, that gets to my question about the search for intelligence within humans. I mean, the search for human intelligence is sometimes a futile search.
Yeah. Well, but we have, we and other mammals have, more than machines so far. And I guess one of the things I wanted to mention that I'd read in the last week or two, and it's something that people will talk about in relation to, smart machines and AI and robots, is the idea of intentionality. That's kind of a philosopher's word, really, I guess, but I think we have a folk sense of what it means that you are a conscious being, and you have a will, and you intend to do things. And another one of the criticisms of AI as we have it now is like, well, it doesn't really intend to do anything. It's just pushing a bunch of numbers around, and and maybe that's what we want. We don't really want it to have any intentions, but it's certainly a difference. Now, what do we understand about humans and what this idea of intentionality is?
One of the big issues
Well,
with AI is with copyright holders, and they're
Yeah,
very upset about suddenly their copyrighted, their personal data is being sucked in by somebody's, AI training. And I just saw that Google had said they're going to give website publishers a way to opt out of having their data used to train the company's AI models. And one would hope there was more of that. Like, it shouldn't just be, you could, if it's out there, you can just suck it in. Of course, doesn't mean they're not going to do it, but there should be a few, breaks that they can apply on that, just endless sucking up of data.
yeah. So just to kind of pivot from this idea of intention to art, I guess another criticism of the AI art stuff is like, well, the way it's usually used, I give it a text prompt and I get something that I want. So there's at least one human with an idea, and it might be funny. I might want to get a New Yorker cartoon that is, I wouldn't be able to draw it very easily, but I know what I would like to see, and maybe that's a good thing. I think there's a lot of people who have ideas but don't have a lot of technique are able to do things. But one of the criticisms is that there's never going to be any great art that these machines do on their own because they don't intend, they don't want, they don't suffer, they haven't loved and lost, so we don't have to worry about that.
That gets to the idea that I've always had, which is AI is best used as a support, for like,
I'm with you.
you don't want AI to make decisions for you. You want it to be a decision support system. And in creating art, it could be that, you have some great art in you that AI could help you to manifest, but it wouldn't necessarily, be the AI created. You're kind of creating it yourself, but the AI is giving you some help, sort of filling in parts that you're having trouble with, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And actually, I think, to me, the biggest danger with AI, the thing that I would be most concerned about, is that we assume that it's more competent than it is. And I've actually experienced that before, where I depended on AI to give me facts, and then I found out that the facts it was giving me were made up, that it was hallucinating. And that doesn't inspire me to have a lot of confidence in AI. So back to, I mentioned decision support. I was in a scenario one time where the idea was that an AI had been the mayor of the town, but a federal law got passed prohibiting the use of AIs as mayors because the AIs lacking discernment kept screwing things up, and causing like catastrophic situations. But even though the AI could no longer serve as mayor, it could serve as a support for the mayor. So it was more like the human AI partnership. And I guess that's what I'm really getting at, is I think the most powerful thing is to have a partnership of artificial intelligence with human intelligence, and that might come close to creating a real intelligence.
Well, I guess one of the aspects of the partnership, and this is something that I've spent a little time thinking about in the last few months, is even humans that are pretty knowledgeable, rational, not necessarily in the grip of some great passion that wants them to harm somebody or not. They're just trying to get about their job, but they still make mistakes. And one of the ways that we could be partners is we have assistants who kind of help us do what we want to do and not forget things, and kind of play by the rules that we establish for ourselves. Um, I guess I won't go into it too much because there's actually some slightly potentially commercial things that am thinking about. But I will just say that I've messed around a little bit with getting Chat GPT to look at the description of a process and try to write some code that would help me manage getting through that process without, you know, screwing things up. And I was partly inspired by um, having worked a long time in the semiconductor industry, as I think you know, where we didn't really call it AI, but it was a highly automated system using a lot of optimization algorithms and some of the same kinds of things that are used, some of the same math that's used in some AI systems at least. But one thing that we were very good about was building these super complex devices with first millions and then hundreds of millions and then billions of devices, transistors and wires. And when you power it up, it's supposed to work because there's something that developed over the course of decades, really, an understanding of how to use a lot of software processes to eventually get out this piece of hardware that works. And some of that is just some of the same kinds of things that happen in like web security, where it's like, okay, I downloaded a file and you get this checksum that says like that's what the file had on the other side, and you want to know that there wasn't a man in the middle attack that gave you something else, so you should run this program and see if you get the same checksum. Things like that were done in this the semiconductor world to say this was the data that we gave you for a transistor, and at the end it better look the same, or this was the software that we gave you to run some kind of integrity check on the electrical behavior of the wires, or the timing of the thing. Is it going to really run at 3 gigahertz or not? If that software is sort of blessed at a certain point in time, then it's not easy to make a change to it. It's locked down, and everything that happens is kind of managed in this nice, high integrity way. And that is something that doesn't really happen in a lot of other important processes out in the world, I would say. So,
one of my first IT jobs was in QA testing, quality
yeah,
assurance, make sure that what's supposed to happen actually happens and it doesn't do something else. And I'm seeing these things that are coming out and becoming a problem when new products or programs or apps are released. And it just seems to me they probably aren't doing a whole lot of quality assurance testing. It's the old deal of, well, so and so has this, so we have to rush ours out and get it on the market before we lose our place in the market. And that's great, but if you get it out on the market and it sucks, then you probably should have done some testing.
yeah. So, well, I will just try to rewind to something, John, that you said, like what you're most afraid of is one thing, but I think, given our history with the internet and a lot of things that nobody really saw coming, was, how does it change us? How does it change us as individuals? How does it change our group interactions? How does it change society? I think those are the things that kind of worry me more. And I think there's some things that I hear from folks that work in education that are a little concerning, that I'm not sure if people know where this is coming from. I'm not sure if people are asking the question, but I'm hearing things like, kids entering as freshmen or something have a really much harder time following instructions or solving any kind of computer problems, and I
Well,
wonder if there's got to be something about the uh, the the milieu that they're growing up in or something that happens for this, or they're just not getting the education and they used to get it. But I think in general, I would say that this is something where like the internet has made certain things easier for us. AI will make certain things easier for us. Is it going to make things so easy that we are really kind of helpless and our brains just shrivel and our
Well, I
brains
don't know.
cooperate with people?
I think another way to look at that, though, is this going, if some things become so easy for us that we don't have to put much effort into them, or they're being done for us by some form of automation, does that free us up to do other things that might be more interesting or important to do?
Well, I would say that,
and I think that's an open question,
yeah, I'd say yeah, and I'd say even if it does free us up to do more important, or things that we think are more important, that suddenly circumstances change, and you just don't know how to do something that you might have been forced to be able to deal. You might have been more flexible in the before times.
I haven't seen this so much in education because, I'm not plugged into education so much anymore, but I kind of see in politics, I am noticing that there's a whole generation of politicians who no longer want to do the work of governance. They just want to perform. And oh, go ahead.
I said maybe it is the same phenomenon or very closely related.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah,
because
and that could be related to the fact that we have like many media now, and people will sort of feel that they're authoring things and performing things, even if only 10 people are seeing what they're posting. But the fact that you can write something or take an image or take a video or whatever and put it somewhere where potentially it can be seen by many people, that gives you the sense that you're doing something that's a little more performative, I think. And I think that that's getting into a lot of people's heads, some more than others. But I wonder if that doesn't feel like a completely healthy situation, even though I'm doing it all the time. Maybe I'm not healthy. Maybe I'm mentally ill.
Well, I mean, there's different levels of this, right? There's the level for your expectations for you doing it yourself, and are you setting up expectations for yourself that won't be fulfilled or something? That's one level, but then there's this other level where the kind of conversations. And is there kind of like, I don't know, like maybe an analogy would be like a magnet or something where, all of the atoms are kind of lined up in one direction. So when we had the old media and everybody watched, Walter Cronkite or Dan Rather, one of those guys, there was a certain amount of like, well, we saw this, we need to talk about this. This is important. This is what the guy said. And then, the conversation kind of diffuses out from there. With the kind of communication sphere that we have now, it's just kind of like this big noisescape in the beginning, and maybe it was kind of harmless, but now I think the way that things get picked up, from Twitter to some sort of something a little higher up on the food chain, and then like suddenly it's in the big mainstream publications. I don't really know.
We just had
it's a big experiment that we're in, and we don't know.
We had a conversation the other day with Jeff Jarvis, who's written a book called The Gutenberg Parenthesis. Yeah. And basically he's talking about, he gets into a whole history of print and how it changed things and how it changed the way people interact, and it changed the way we think about things, and it changed the whole concept of authority. and it led to, hierarchies and that sort of thing. And then the internet came, and the print era sort of ended. And before print, we were kind of more conversational, and the communication between people was sort of like person to person.
Right.
And then print created this whole concept of the mass and mass media and so forth. And then print goes away, and we're back to having conversations and more person to person and so forth. But one of the points that I think he's making, and kind of the way I took it, is that he's saying that this is like a transitional thing. We're at a point where we're changing from the print era to this next era. And he says it took, many, many years for the effects of print to really take hold. And for, there was a whole process of change that went on and on and on. And that we're so early in the transition from the print era to the internet era that it's probably unrealistic to make too many assumptions about what the real effect of the internet has been, because one of the realities we have is that the internet has not completely escaped from the print era yet. We still think in terms of print media, and a lot of what we do on the internet ties back to the print way of thinking. But the internet over time is going to take us away from that completely. And we're going to have kind of new ways of thinking and interacting and so forth. And a lot of the difficulty we're seeing right now could just be a manifestation of confusion and weirdness around that transition.
Well, it could get weird. Hopefully, a lot of the ways that
But
it
then
gets in a good way.
there's other strange attractors in there, and one of them is AI. What effect is AI actually going to have? Because we don't really understand. We don't have a good sense of what AI is going to be yet. And we have things like climate change that might just kill us all, We might not have that much of a future.
I will say that as the hot summer progressed, I became less worried about AI and more worried about how I could stay awake in the afternoon after being outside for 2 hours before 9 o'clock or something.
I've read way too much science fiction, and it's caused me to have a long-term paranoia about, having too much invested in my digital life, and I've got way too much technology going on here, which it's caused me to hang on to my analog life, which where I got started with in media, because I have this thing about what happens when some evildoer, pulls the trigger on their EMP device and an electromagnetic pulse wipes out our communications.
Yeah.
What do we do then?
Well, it would be good for you to have kept some of those Firefox. Was it Firefox? There was some kind of back to
Foxfire. It was Foxfire, I think. Yeah.
But I think that's there's a more evolved version of that. I think there was a group somewhere in the Midwest that basically had kind of a civilizational bootstrap kit. Like, we've got the tools to make the tools to make the tools. And so you can basically just take our kit and our knowledge that we have here in our little group, and this is enough to take to a third world country or a post-apocalyptic scenario and kind of reboot the system. And I'm like, glad somebody's doing that. I know I should do more of it.
Yeah, I've been holding on to way too much stuff that I just thought, well, if my digital life comes to an end, I've at least got, my My vinyl albums.
Yeah. Well, I got a bunch of instruments with skins and wires and things like that that I still like to get out and play now and again. But
This, this is kind of making me think about that Twilight Zone episode where, Burgess Meredith is the last man alive after nuclear holocaust. He was off in a vault somewhere, so he was spared. And his whole life is devoted to reading. He loves books, and that's all he really cares about. So he gets out of the vault, and um, he goes and finds the library, and it's like, oh, this is it. I don't have to worry about any other people or anything. It's me and the books. I'll just read. And then he breaks his glasses.
That's my fear.
Yeah, that sounds like one of those. Was that a Twilight Zone, or it sounds like one of the endings?
Yeah, that was Twilight Zone.
Yeah, and
Well,
are you going to eat that book? I mean, that's another problem there.
I think there is a problem with science fiction, which, I mean, I don't know whether it's exactly a problem, but the thing is that science fiction kind of gets into our heads, right? And we have ideas that we start to accept that may not be realistic at all. The example I always think about is time travel. I don't think for a minute that people are going to be able to travel through time, that you're going to be able to pick a year in the future and go there, or in the past. I think that time travel is an interesting device for creating interesting fictions around it, but it's never going to be a real thing. But I can guarantee you that people who've read a lot of science fiction tend to kind of assume time travel is something that's going to happen, or that it may be happening,
Yeah.
And I don't buy it for a minute. I think there's a lot of that kind of stuff that we get into our heads from reading science fiction. And I don't know what, I mean, there's no solution to that. I mean, it kind of gets back to that, my thing about the search for human intelligence. Our intelligence is somewhat programmed. And I don't think any of us is as intelligent as we assume we are. Even people who don't assume they're intelligent probably assume they're more intelligent than they really are. We have ideas about what it really means to be a thinking human being. And we have ideas that the way humans think is sort of like a paramount thing. Like, we think so much better than any other animal or creature in the universe. And I just don't know that that's true. I mean, I think that it's not a mystery to me why we assume it, but I just don't think it's true.
I'm going to just try to rewind back to something I was talking about, this idea of intentionality and some research that I just read about. It's another difference between us and most of the AI that's around, is that we breathe, we take pauses, in our thinking. Like, I could go on talking for a long time, but eventually I'll run out of breath and I'll have to take a breath. And what happens in that little interval that we take the breath, or maybe the processor kind of resets or something, right? So the research that I was reading about intentionality was some folks that I followed for a long time at Florida Atlantic University, which was always one of the centers of what's called like dynamical systems theory, which kind of includes, chaos as part of it. And this guy there named Scott Kelso that's had a lab for many years. He's kind of officially emeritus now, but apparently still getting stuff out. And they did some work with infants who are in some kind of a device, basically like kind of like a table or a stroller or something, where they're laying on their backs, and if they move their feet, they can make it go. And when they make it go, they'll see the world moving around them, so that they can know that they're making it go. And I guess what they were trying to do is measure this kind of the moment or the transition where an infant realizes that it can make stuff happen, that it has, it has the power to cause things to happen in the world. And that was pretty fascinating. And one of the things about it is there were different groups of infants. There seemed to be like maybe three different clusters of personality types or pathways to this discovery. But I think universally there's something where they take a break. So it's like they don't just continually move, because in order to know that you have the power to do something, you have to stop doing it and notice that when you stop, the world stops changing. And it makes sense, right? That's kind of the only way that you could know that what you're doing is having an effect, is if you stop doing it. But then you have to have some sort of meta reflection or something to go, oh, well, it's me. It's the one with the ego and the intentions to do stuff that is either making it go or not making it go. So I find that to be like kind of a fascinating, little piece that is kind of at the intersection of maybe neuroscience and humans with bodies. And I don't know if robotics will ever like have the need to take that pause and if they would sort of make this leap to knowing that they're the ones that are doing the thing. But I can't see any reason that wouldn't happen.
Does a artificial intelligence or a machine or a robot or whatever actually know things in the sense that we think about it, or is it just processing instructions?
Well, that's
Can
always
it have an intuition?
Yeah, that's been one of the big questions around the sort of intersection of AI and learning and philosophy, is the nature of meaning, and what is it for humans, and are the machines ever going to have anything like what we got? And I think the side that I've kind of been most sympathetic to in that argument is there's a big gap because we do have bodies and we have this emotional system and we breed and we have desires and needs and intentions, and they don't. And we don't really know if we could build something that doesn't have. The only existence proof we have of intelligence was built with that kind of substrate. But exactly how it plays out and could it be turned into math? Maybe. There's another paper that I read recently, or I have it open. I have not fully read it, but a woman that I've followed on Twitter, Iris Van Rouge. I think I've seen her give a talk. So she's kind of another one of these like social scientists with one foot in computer science, and she was on a team that wrote a paper saying, basically in the good old days, AI was kind of a support for psychology to figure out how the brain worked. But now they think they can just kind of learn how the brain works, or just somehow get there, bootstrapping and throwing more processors at it. So they did some math and thought that they have a proof that says it is impossible that you will machine learn your way to acting like people act. So, I don't know how much peer review has happened on their thing yet, but I thought it was kind of an interesting argument. So that was part one of their paper. Part two was, so if you're not going to do that, maybe what should we do instead? Well, maybe we should go back to this. First of all, we need more thinking. We need more ideas. And then we need more, sort of simulations, building the ideas and criticizing them. But this idea that we're just going to automatically charge with machine learning and do more, or maybe genetic algorithms that evolve the architecture or something like that, it's probably not going to get us there.
Well, we can all relax, because I just saw that Mark Zuckerberg has released Meta AI. So, of course, that's going to solve, according to him, that is going to solve all the problems that you have with AI, or not.
Yeah, well, they're definitely big players in that world and have released a lot of stuff, open source, and I think they struggle to figure out how to make products that work and make money. And don't.
Garbage in, garbage out.
So where are we at, guys? Are we coming? 5
We've
minutes.
got about 5 minutes.
If we had,
Liz.
yeah, no, if we had more time, I would talk about there's actually a really good essay in the New York Times that just appeared that it's called "The AI Wars Have Three Factions and They All Crave Power."
No
And
kidding.
that's by Nathan Sanders and Bruce Schneier, who was our guest not long ago. And it's really pretty good. And the three factions are doomsayers. I think that's kind of self-explanatory. And then there's the reformers. So the doomsayers are worried about what AI is going to be in the future. And in fact, that's their main concern. And they would actually sacrifice the good of the present to prevent the catastrophe of the future. And then the reformers are more concerned with the present and worried about the ethics of AI right now. And then the other one is the warriors, who are mostly focused on competitiveness and national security and that sort of thing. And it's a really good article. If we had another hour, we could talk about that article.
Who was
probably
the first
for an
guy that
hour.
wasn't Bruce Schneier?
His name is, scrolling back up, Nathan Sanders, who is a data scientist from the Berkman Klein Center at Harvard.
Have a look at
It's
that.
worth reading. Yeah.
Well,
So we have 3 minutes left. How can you sum the nature and reality of AI in 3 minutes?
I don't know about that, but I mean, I will just say that my ideas about how the brain works are more about rhythms, oscillations, and I think there's, I've thought some about how you get a deep learning like construct out of that. People actually have told me at one point, they're like, you kind of invented an alternate version of it. And at first I'm like, I wish I'd thought of that, but I guess it's better if somebody else does. So I think I still hold out a little hope and trepidation that, maybe some of the work that comes out of neuroscience will in fact play into that, but I kind of stopped working on it. So
I'm sorry, Dave.
again,
We can't do that, said Al.
Yeah, but art-wise, I think time travel is something that, I think we should have excellent time traveling games or clubs that co-construct time travel with all the tools that we have today. Like, we should be able to build a virtual world just by talking it up and putting characters in there that speak the right way. And some of them might be, I am an actor, I'm in this world. Some of the other people might be non-player characters, but so I think
the metaverse.
That's all stuff to look forward to. When I first started hearing about some of the AI kind of sketch programs that could very quickly build you a picture based on your description, I thought, wow, these improv theater groups, of which there are hundreds here, it seems like maybe they could use that when they had cheap projection or really big display screens or something. It's just like, as soon as somebody starts talking about the world they're in, somebody up in the booth just basically builds it, and there it is, and then we don't get to use our imaginations to see it.
I can't wait for the comedy improv AI to come out. I'm sure that'll be fun.
Well, I tried to get some comedy to happen, some stand-up. I don't know, John, if we ever talked about this, or maybe the last time I was on here, the absurd stuff that I tried to do, imagine Jose Luis Borges is a stand-up comedian.
100 years of comedy.
Came up with stuff, but I don't know how funny it was.
We have reached the end of the hour.
And the end of the
And if it worked, I have thrown up our logo.
There it is.
Did it work?
It is there.
Oh my gosh.
We're everywhere.
That's a first. Well,
Thanks,
David.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for asking me again, and I'll see you guys around.
All right.
All right.
All right.
Everyone.
Hasta la vista. Thanks so much.